The sharp, plummeting pain in my abdomen made me slip. My whole body slid across the wet bathroom tiles, the back of my head cracking against the edge of the porcelain tub. For a moment, my vision went white. When I came to, a warm liquid was trickling down my inner thigh. It mixed with the water from the shower, blooming across the white floor in a pale red stain. I looked down. It wasn't pale red. It was red. My phone was on the vanity. I propped myself up, my hands slipping on the wet floor. It took 2 tries to reach the screen. 847 PM. The number I dialed was Harrison Vance's. It rang and rang. No one answered. I dialed again. The number you have dialed is not available at this time. Another wave of cramps seized my abdomen. I bent over, my forehead pressed against the cold tile, curling into a ball. The bleeding was getting heavier. I could feel it gushing out of me in warm surges, quickly turning cold on the floor. I called a 3rd time, a 4th, a 5th, all went straight to voicemail. I found our housekeeper's number. Off. Harrison's assistant. Off. I was 28 weeks along. At the last checkup, the doctor said the baby was perfectly healthy, but my own constitution was weak and my family should be extra attentive. Harrison had been looking at his phone, not even lifting his head as he mumbled an acknowledgement. I knew who he was messaging. But that was at 28 weeks. 7 months. The baby was already kicking me. I dialed 911. 911? What's your emergency? I'm 28 weeks pregnant. I fell, and I'm bleeding a lot. Okay, ma'am. Please give me your address. Number 17, Riverside Estates. We're dispatching an ambulance now, ma'am. However, I need to warn you there is severe, unprecedented gridlock downtown tonight due to a massive public event. EMS is warning of significant delays. Please stay on the line with me. Delays? How long? 10 minutes? 30? I looked at the pool of blood beneath me, spreading faster and faster. I could feel my life slipping away. I hung up. I knew I couldn't wait for an uncertain ETA. I opened a rideshare app. Queue, 67 people. Estimated wait, 45 minutes. I switched to another platform. No cars available. I tried a third. A pink banner ad popped up on the screen. Vance Holdings $500, mega surge. All drivers heading to the downtown plaza for tonight's Romance for the Ages event will receive an instant premium bonus. I swiped the ad away without reading the details and tried to hail a ride again. No drivers available in your area. I crawled out of the bathroom, my knees scraping against the cold tile, and grabbed the bedroom door frame to pull myself up. The bathrobe I was wearing was soaked through with blood, the lower half a deep, dark red, as if it had been dyed. I grabbed a coat, wrapped it around myself, and walked barefoot to the front door for my car keys. But my hands were shaking, and dark spots swam in my vision. I couldn't drive. I dialed Harrison's number again. This time, it connected. But it wasn't him. The background was a cacophony of music and laughter. A young man's voice answered. It was his driver, Mike. Mrs. Vance? Mike, where's Harrison? Mr. Vance is busy right now, ma'am. He can't come to the phone. Is there something I can help you with? I'm bleeding, I heard my own voice, flat and unrecognizable. I can't get a car. Can you? Hold on, Mrs. Vance, let me ask him. The noise on the other end grew louder. I heard a woman's laugh. Someone shouting, Harrison, come look at this. Then Mike's voice grew distant, as if he'd been pulled away. The line didn't disconnect. I just stood there in the entryway, holding the phone to my ear, my bare feet freezing on the marble floor. Blood trickled down my legs, pooling around my feet. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. No one came back to the phone. I hung up. When I stepped outside, the entire street was dark. Riverside Estates was an exclusive community with few residents. At 10 p.m. on a late autumn night, not a single person was out for a walk. I followed the streetlights, each step making me feel as if something inside my abdomen was sinking lower. By the time I reached the main road at the edge of the community, I was drenched in a cold sweat. Under the streetlights, it was clearer. My coat was soaked in blood. I wasn't even wearing shoes, my bare feet pressed against the cold asphalt. I raised my hand to hail a cab. The first taxi drove past without stopping. The second didn't stop either. The third slowed down, the driver rolling down his window. He glanced at me, a flicker of hesitation on his face. The nearest hospital, please, I begged. Sorry, lady. I'm heading downtown, not taking local fares. What? The CEO of Vance Holdings is throwing some insane PR stunt for his girlfriend's birthday. They're dropping a massive bonus for any driver who shows up at the main plaza to form a giant heart with our headlights. Everyone's flocking there. You won't find a single ride out here tonight. He glanced in the rearview mirror at my condition. I'm having a miscarriage, I said, my knuckles white as I gripped his window frame. Please. Take me to the hospital. The driver's expression changed. He looked at his phone, then back at me. Get in. I'll take a side street. Just don't let anyone see my license plate. I pulled the door open. The moment I sat down, the fabric of the seat was stained with a dark patch of blood. The driver saw it in the rearview mirror and sucked in a sharp breath. That's a lot of blood. Is anyone with you? Your family? I didn't answer. The city lights blurred past the window. As we neared the city center, traffic came to a standstill. A river of black cars flowed in the same direction, their lights glowing. Then, the giant digital billboards lit up. The entire facade of a skyscraper was illuminated, a cascade of pink light pouring down. A woman's face appeared in a rotating slideshow. Sloane, Harrison's college girlfriend. She was smiling radiantly, a boy of 4 or 5 standing beside her. Happy birthday, Sloane. My life is for you. Harrison Vance. The letters were 3 stories high. The driver muttered, Geez, the CEO of Vance Holdings is loaded. This car buyout must have cost him $10–20 million. And all these billboards. They say she's been the love of his life since college. Even his actual wife probably doesn't get this kind of treatment. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in blood. The crevices under my fingernails were filled with a dark, dried red. We're here. That's Metropolitan General up ahead. Before the car had fully stopped, I pushed the door open. The moment I stood up, my legs gave out and my knees hit the pavement. The driver shouted something from behind me as people ran over to help. My vision started to blur, the sounds around me fading into the distance. The last thing I saw was the pink glow above me, an endless, overwhelming sea of pink light, lit by him for someone else. When I woke up, I saw a white ceiling and smelled antiseptic. An IV was taped to my left hand. My right hand instinctively went to my belly. It was flat, soft, collapsed, and empty. There was nothing there. I kept my hand there, pressed against my flat abdomen, my fingers slowly curling into a fist, as if trying to grasp something that was no longer there. A nurse was beside me. Miss Hayes, you're awake. How are you feeling? The baby? The nurse paused. She glanced toward the door, then back at me. The doctor will be in to speak with you shortly. Please don't move. The baby's gone, I said. It wasn't a question. The nurse didn't answer, but her eyes reddened. You were hemorrhaging when you arrived. It was a placental abruption. We couldn't save the baby. The doctors performed an emergency procedure and managed to save your uterus. She paused. We kept trying your emergency contacts, but no one answered. You signed the surgical consent form yourself, do you remember? I didn't remember. I only remembered the pink light. Should I try to contact your family again? No. The nurse gave me a hesitant look and left the room. I was alone. The curtains weren't fully drawn, and the sky outside was just beginning to lighten. I turned to look at the phone on the bedside table, placed there by someone. The screen was cracked in one corner, probably from when I fell. I picked it up. 27 missed calls. All from 911 dispatch and the hospital. From Harrison, 0. I opened a news app. The top headline, Vance Holdings CEO. Spends millions to charter city's cab's birthday, creating the most romantic night in the city. I clicked on the video. In the city's main plaza, hundreds of black cars were arranged in the shape of a heart. Pink lights bathed the entire street. Sloane stood in the center of the crowd, laughing. Her son was perched on a man's shoulders. That man was Harrison. He was smiling gently, one hand securely holding the boy's leg, the other resting on Sloane's waist. A flood of comments scrolled across the screen. Oh my God, so sweet. This is what true love looks like. Rich people's love is just different. I stared at the image, my thumb swiping across the screen. The video autoplayed the next clip, a behind-the-scenes reel from a street-style blogger. Sources say Mr. Vance spent over $20 million tonight to book out the city's car services and outdoor advertising, all to surprise his first love. Witnesses say the two held hands the entire time, and Mr. Vance even kissed Sloane's forehead in public. $20 million. I couldn't get a car last night because the entire city's fleet was busy creating a heart for his one true love. I had walked barefoot on the asphalt, blood streaming down my legs, because I couldn't get a car. My baby was gone. Because I couldn't get a car. I placed the phone back on the nightstand. And then I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a cold one. I just laughed. Like I had suddenly understood something I hadn't been able to grasp for a very long time. The incision in my abdomen ached, the stitches pulling with the movement. But that pain was nothing compared to something else. Something called, it wasn't even worth naming. The phone rang. Harrison's number. I watched the screen vibrate 6 times before it went silent. 3 seconds later, it rang again. I answered. Clara. His voice was hoarse, as if he'd just woken up. The background was quiet. He must have gone back to one of his places. The hospital called and said you were admitted. What happened? Is it serious? I'll have Mike come pick you up. Don't bother. A 2-second silence. What is going on? Why didn't you call me if you weren't feeling well? I stared at the ceiling. White, clean, empty. I didn't see it. My phone was in the car last night. I know where you were. I cut him off. He stopped. I waited 5 seconds, but he didn't continue. Harrison. Yes? The baby's gone. The other end of the line went completely silent. I could hear his breathing become heavy, ragged. After about 10 seconds, which felt like 10 minutes to me, he spoke. What do you mean? You had a miscarriage? Placental abruption. Severe hemorrhaging. I signed the surgical consent form myself. I'm coming over right now. Don't, I said. You're busy. By the way, the birthday party was a huge success, wasn't it? Top trending story. Congratulations. What are you talking about? That was a corporate PR event. It's not what you think. I'm not thinking anything, I said and hung up the phone. Then I pulled out the IV needle. I walked to the nurse's station. Miss Hayes, you can't just leave. Your wound. What about the discharge procedures? You can't be discharged yet. You lost nearly a liter of blood last night. You need to be under observation for at least 48 hours. Get the paperwork. The nurse looked at my face and fell silent. She must have seen something in my expression. She didn't argue further. She turned and handed me a form. Sign this. Discharge against medical advice. You assume all liability. I signed it. Back in the room, I had nothing to pack. I'd come barefoot. My phone rang again. Harrison. I looked at the caller ID and didn't answer. It rang again. I ignored it. A third time, a text message came through. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere. We need to talk. I read the message, then ejected the SIM card from my phone. I borrowed a pair of slippers from a nurse, signed the last form, and walked out of the hospital. As I left the emergency department, the sun was fully up. The cars in the plaza were gone, but the ground was still littered with remnants of the celebration. Fragments of pink balloons, flyers with Sloane's face on them, LED strips shaped like the word love. Sanitation workers were cleaning up. I walked over the debris. The slippers were too big, and the wound in my abdomen pulled with every step. With each movement, I felt something draining out of my body. It wasn't blood. It was something harder to stanch than blood. There was a public payphone at the corner. I stopped and took out my wallet. Inside was a business card, old and worn, its corners curled. A friend had pressed it into my hand 3 months ago. I had been pregnant then, and I'd laughed, saying I would never need it. I dialed the number. It connected. A crisp, professional woman's voice answered. Rachel Quinn, attorney at law. Rachel, this is Clara Hayes. Miss Hayes, how can I help you? I want a divorce. A brief pause. All right. Are you able to come to my office to discuss the details? I'm on my way. I looked down at myself. A hospital gown, borrowed slippers, unwashed hair, blood still seeping through the gauze on my abdomen. I'll be there this afternoon. Good. Is 2 o'clock okay? Yes. Regarding the assets. I don't want a single thing. This time, the pause was longer. Miss Hayes, are you certain? To my knowledge, Vance Holdings, I'm certain. Very well. We'll discuss the details in person this afternoon. I hung up and stood inside the phone booth, looking out at the street. The giant billboard on the building across the way was still lit, replaying scenes from last night's celebration. Harrison's profile, magnified 3 stories high in the morning light. I watched it for 3 seconds, then turned and walked away. The sun was rising. It was warm. When it hit my skin, the wound didn't hurt as much. Or maybe I was just numb. I wasn't sure. It didn't matter anymore. At 2 p.m. that day, I arrived at Rachel Quinn's law firm. It was in an unassuming office building downtown, on the 7th floor. There was no receptionist. When I pushed the door open, she was standing by the window on a call. She saw me and froze for a second. Her gaze moved from my face, which must have been deathly pale, down to my feet in the hospital slippers, then to the faint bloodstain visible beneath my coat. She ended her call. "Have a seat." "You said you don't want any of the assets," Rachel said, forgoing pleasantries and opening her laptop. "The publicly reported value of Vance Holdings is around $5 billion. What's in your name?" "About $2 million in a joint account. Everything else is in his name." "Real estate?" "The house in Riverside Estates is in his name, the cars too." "So, you effectively—" "I have my own money," I said. Rachel looked up at me. I didn't elaborate. She nodded and didn't press. "Okay, so your demands are a divorce, waive all rights to community property, and secure your personal freedom. As quickly as possible." "Yes." "And his position on this?" "He doesn't know yet." Rachel's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Are you sure you don't want to negotiate? With a $5 billion estate, even 1%? I don't need it." She looked at me for a few seconds, then closed her laptop. "Miss Hayes, I've been doing this for 12 years. I've seen too many people make decisions in moments of extreme emotional distress and later regret them. In your current state—" "Rachel," I interrupted her, "I'm not being emotional, I'm being clear-headed." I handed her my phone, showing her the screenshot of the morning's top news story. This was last night. I was having a miscarriage while he was throwing a birthday party for someone else. He chartered every available car service in the city. I couldn't get a ride to the hospital. Rachel stared at the screen, her lips pressed into a thin line. "My baby is gone." She handed the phone back to me and reopened her computer. "I can have a draft of the agreement ready today. Do you have any status overseas?" "Greek permanent residency. Got it 3 years ago." "Is your passport on hand?" "It's in the safe at home." "Then you'll need to go back and get it." "He won't be there today. He has a board meeting on Tuesdays, from 3 to 6. Rachel's typing paused for a fraction of a second. She didn't say anything, but I knew what she was thinking. A wife treated like this, who could still recite her husband's schedule down to the hour. It wasn't love, it was habit. The habit of carving his timetable into my brain, of arranging my own breathing around his rhythm. Today was the last day. "I'll email the agreement to you," Rachel said. "Review it, and if everything is in order, sign it, take photos, and send them to me. I'll start the filing process and notarization on my end." "When are you planning to leave?" "Tomorrow. The day after at the latest." Rachel closed her laptop and took off her glasses, looking at me. "Miss Hayes, you know your physical condition?" "I know." She didn't push it. "One more thing," I said as I stood up. "The core architecture of Vance Holdings' risk management system is built on a proprietary algorithm I patented before we married. I allowed them to use it, but I hold the absolute root access. After I leave, I'm revoking their licensing rights and activating the dormant protocol." Rachel slowly looked up. "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Just letting you know that without my root keys, their billion-dollar shield is just a glass window. If anyone from his side contacts you asking about my work, I don't know anything." I walked to the door. "Miss Hayes." I turned back. Rachel's expression was calm, but her voice was a degree softer. "Take care of yourself." I nodded, pulled the door open, and left. At 4:15 p.m., I was back at the house in Riverside Estates. The door unlocked with my fingerprint. The house was empty. The housekeeper's shoes weren't in the closet. Harrison had probably called her away to help with something. I didn't want to know what. I went upstairs to the master suite. In the walk-in closet, my clothes hung on 3 racks to the left, his on the right. An empty space separated them, like an invisible line. In 4 years of marriage, that line had never been crossed. I didn't pack any clothes. I opened the second drawer of the nightstand and took out a dark blue file folder. Inside were my Greek residency card, my passport, an HSBC offshore account card, and an encrypted USB drive. On that drive were the master keys to the entire risk management system of Vance Holdings. 4 years ago, when Harrison took over the family business, he faced his first hostile overseas short-selling attack. He was clueless. It was me, using these programs, who helped him stop the bleeding within 48 hours. Later, the second time, the third time, he always thought it was luck, or the new risk management team he'd hired was exceptionally competent. He never once asked me, I tucked the folder into a small tote bag. I stood in the middle of the closet and looked at my 3 racks of clothes. Some were bought by him, or more accurately, by his assistant. Every season, the assistant would do a bulk purchase, buying for him and, as an afterthought, for me. The styles were conservative, the colors muted, all his preferences. I wouldn't take a single piece. Downstairs, on the coffee table, was a framed wedding photo. Me in a white gown, him in a black tuxedo. We stood half a step apart. Our shoulders didn't even touch. I turned the frame face down on the table. As I walked out the front door, my hands trembled, not from fear, but because the wound in my abdomen was seeping blood again. The doctor had said at least 48 hours of observation. It had only been 18. I crouched by the door for a moment, waiting for the dizziness to pass, then stood up and hailed a car. This time, a ride came instantly. The birthday party was over. The cars were all back in service. At 7 p.m., I checked into a business hotel near the airport. The room was small, the bed hard. When the curtains were drawn, no light came through. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my email. Rachel's message was there, an 8-page divorce agreement attached. I read every word. The core terms were just 3. Both parties voluntarily agree to dissolve the marriage. The wife waives all rights to the division of community property and will not seek any financial compensation. The female party obtains full and complete personal freedom. The male party shall not, in any way, restrict the female party's movements, communications, or right to exit the country. Rachel had added the 3rd clause for me. I printed 2 copies, signed and dated them. Then I took out my phone, opened the camera, and photographed each page. 8 pages, 16 photos. I made sure the signature and date were clear on everyone, then sent them to Rachel. Signed. Flight to Athens tomorrow at 10 a.m. Rachel replied instantly. Received. Offshore notarization will be completed tonight. Let me know when you've settled in over there. I put the phone on the nightstand. Then I bent over, my hands braced on my knees. Something inside me was breaking. Not the wound. The wound was a dull, physical thing that could be stitched. This was different. It had no shape, no location. But it was shattering. My hands clenched the bedsheet, my knuckles white. Don't cry. There's nothing to cry about. 28 weeks, 7 months. He would kick me. Every morning at 5 o'clock like clockwork. Once, I told Harrison about it. He was looking at his phone and just grunted without looking up. After that, I stopped telling him. I relaxed my grip. 2 damp spots on the sheet. Not tears, sweat from my palms. I stood up and went to the bathroom to wash my face. The person in the mirror was ashen, her lips colorless, with dark circles under her eyes. But her eyes were dry. Back on the bed, I organized the printed divorce agreement, put it in the folder with my passport. The phone lit up again. Not Rachel, Harrison. 23 messages on WhatsApp. I glanced at them. Where are you? The hospital said you checked out. Did you go home? I'm sending Mike to get you. Clara, stop this. Whatever it is, come back and we'll talk about it. I'm sorry about the baby. I really didn't know you were in trouble. I'm on my way home now. Wait for me. The last message was from 3 minutes ago. No one's home. Where the hell did you go? You're not answering your phone. Clara, can you please not be like this? Let's just talk. I finished reading and didn't reply. I switched the phone to silent and tucked it under the pillow. As I lay down, my abdomen twinged with pain. I curled onto my side, my palm resting on my flat stomach. Empty. Nothing was there anymore. I closed my eyes. The flight was in 9 hours. The alarm went off at 6 a.m. I was already awake. To be precise, I hadn't really slept. The pain in my abdomen had woken me every hour or two. The phone under the pillow had been vibrating all night. I didn't check it. I got up, washed my face, and double-checked the contents of my bag. Passport, residency card, offshore account card, encrypted USB drive. The clothes I'd bought from the hotel convenience store yesterday, a black hoodie and sweatpants. It was enough. I checked out and took a cab to the airport. In the car, I took out my phone. Harrison's messages had piled up to 67. The tone of the last few had started to change. Clara, if you don't answer me, I'm calling the police. Are you doing this to spite me? I can explain what happened last night. The Sloan thing was a PR event arranged by the company. It's not what you think. Calm down. I'm really worried about you. I'm devastated about the baby too. Don't go through this alone. Come back and we'll face it together. Please. I read the last one, exited the conversation, opened my contacts, found Harrison Vance, and deleted it. Then, I opened the remote access portal for the Vance Holdings internal system, entered my credentials, and accessed the core risk management panel. The screen showed the status of 6 hedging programs, all green. These 6 programs were the ones I had written, one by one, over the past 4 years. Each corresponded to a specific overseas risk exposure. Without them, Vance Holdings' $3 billion in overseas positions would be completely naked. I clicked Deactivate All. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to place all core hedging programs in dormant mode? Reactivation will require the original keyholder. Confirm. The 6 green lights turned gray. I closed the page. Then I did one last thing. I popped the SIM card out of my phone. It was tiny, the size of a fingernail. I'd had it for 4 years. I got this number after we got married. It was on his corporate plan. His assistant, his driver, his housekeeper, they all had this number. I held it between my fingers. The taxi pulled up to the departures terminal. I pushed the door open and stood at the entrance to the terminal. The early morning wind was cold. It was late October. The pink balloon fragments from the other night had probably been swept away by now. I tossed the SIM card into a nearby trash can. It was so light, it made no sound as it fell. Inside the airport, at gate B7, the flight to Athens via Dubai. A 4-hour journey. I sat in a window seat. The gauze on my abdomen needed changing, but there was no time. I zipped my hoodie up to the top, letting the fabric rest loosely over the wound to minimize friction. The boarding announcement began. The people around me were a mix of travelers, business people, vacationers. No one could have guessed that the woman sitting at gate B7 had lost her 7-month-old baby just 18 hours ago. My phone, now just a device without a SIM card, could still connect to the airport Wi-Fi. I opened my email and sent one last message to Rachel. At the airport. Final confirmation before boarding. Once the agreement is signed by the other party, I will not be involved in any follow-up. All communication goes through you. He will not get my new contact information. Rachel replied, Understood. I will handle everything. Be safe. I closed my email and opened a browser. The top trending news was still about last night's celebration. The article had over 100 million views. The comments were a uniform chorus of, So romantic, true love, Mr. Vance is so devoted. I looked at it for 2 seconds and closed the tab. The final boarding call came. I stood up and got in line. I handed my passport to the gate agent. She scanned it, looked up at me with a smile. Have a pleasant flight. I walked down the jet bridge. It was long, lit by a cold, white light. Every step took me further away from this city. Away from that empty house. From the man who never came home on time. From the man who lit up the city for another woman. At the entrance to the aircraft, I paused. Not out of hesitation. A sudden, sharp pain shot through my abdomen. I leaned against the wall of the plane for a few seconds to steady myself. A flight attendant came over. Ma'am, are you all right? I'm fine. I entered the cabin, found my seat, and fastened my seatbelt. Outside the window was a gray, overcast runway. In the distance, a plane was taking off, its body tilting as it sliced through the low-hanging clouds and disappeared in seconds. I was about to disappear, too. From Harrison Vance's world, from this city, from the sight of everyone who knew me. The plane began to taxi, the roar of the engines growing louder. I rested my forehead against the window. The glass was cool. Goodbye. The moment of takeoff pressed me back into my seat. I closed my eyes. My hand, out of habit, went to my abdomen. It froze there, empty. I pulled my hand back and placed it on the armrest. That would never happen again. 30 minutes after takeoff, at an altitude of 30,000 feet, I knew that on the ground, Harrison had probably just discovered the open safe. He would be tearing the house apart, looking for clues. Then he would call my number and hear the message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He would panic, but he wouldn't be truly afraid yet. He would think I was just throwing a tantrum, using my disappearance to force him to submit. He would think that in a few days I would come back, that I would contact him, just like every time before. Because in his world, I didn't have the ability to leave. I had no money, he thought, no connections, nowhere to go. He would soon find out he was wrong. But that was his problem now. I pulled down the window shade and the cabin darkened. I wrapped myself tightly in the blanket and closed my eyes. In 14 hours, I would land on another continent, by another sea, under a different kind of sunlight, a sunlight without Harrison Vance. Meanwhile, in the house at Riverside Estates, Harrison dialed Clara's number for the 42nd time. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. He stood in the bedroom doorway, clutching his phone. The walk-in closet door was open. On the left, on 3 racks, all of her clothes were still there, not a single piece missing. But the second drawer of the nightstand was open and empty. His wife's passport was gone. Harrison called his assistant. Check if Clara has any international travel records for today. Mr. Vance, what do you mean? Now. Immediately. 3 minutes later, the assistant called back. Mr. Vance, Miss Hayes departed from JFK this morning at 7:48 a.m. Her destination was Athens. Harrison's fingers tightened around his phone, his knuckles turning white. Book me a flight to Athens for tonight. Mr. Vance, you have a... Cancel everything. He hung up. He stood in the empty bedroom. The photo frame on the coffee table, face down. He had seen it when he came in, but hadn't turned it over. Suddenly, he felt how quiet the house was. It had been quiet before. Clara was always quiet when she was home. She never spoke loudly, never turned on the TV, never played music. She was the kind of person who had a very low presence. But this quiet was different. This was an empty quiet. He walked into the closet and reached out, touching the clothes on the left-hand racks. The fabric slid through his fingers. A gray cashmere coat. The assistant had bought it last year. He couldn't remember how many times Clara had worn it. He couldn't remember what colors she liked to wear. Standing there, he suddenly couldn't picture her face. Not completely. He remembered her features, but what did she look like when she smiled? When was the last time she had smiled? He couldn't remember. His phone rang. It was Sloan. He looked at the caller ID and didn't answer. It rang for 8 seconds, then stopped. A text message came through. Harrison, thank you so much for last night. Leo keeps talking about how much fun he had with the cars. Let's do something again soon? Harrison placed the phone face down on the nightstand. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped, his head bowed. Outside, the sun was bright. In late October, the sky was a deep blue. His wife was already at 30,000 feet. He didn't know it, but he thought that in 2 days, a week at most, she would be back. 1 week later, Harrison's assistant dialed Clara's number for the 17th time. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. The assistant hung up and stood outside the CEO's office, hesitating for a moment before knocking. Mr. Vance, Mrs. Vance's number is still out of service. We checked with immigration. She did land in Athens, but we can't find her specific whereabouts. We can't access the Greek systems. Harrison sat behind his desk, spinning a pen in his hand. Contact her father's people. The pen stopped. We did. The Hayes family's butler said, and I quote, "Our daughter's movements do not need to be reported to Mr. Vance." Harrison put the pen down, his fingertips tapping on the desk. Fine. Let her play as long as she wants. She'll come back when she's cooled off. Let's put this aside. Is the afternoon meeting ready? It is, but Mr. Vance, there's something else. Speak. The Risk Management Department reported a major issue this morning. The 6 core programs in the overseas hedging system have all gone into dormant mode. The key verification failed. They say they need the original key holder to reactivate them, but the holder's information is encrypted. They can't find out who it is. Harrison looked up at his assistant. What does that mean? A system failure? Not a failure. It was a manual operation. Someone deliberately set all the programs to dormant a week ago. The director of risk management said he never even knew these programs existed. They're at the base code level, written into the deepest part of the system. Harrison's brow furrowed, but only for a moment. Have the tech department crack it. They tried. The keys are double encrypted. Tech says without biometric verification from the original holder, it's impossible to crack. Then hire an outside team. Right away. The assistant hesitated. Mr. Vance, about this key holder. The programmers in risk management said that judging by the coding style, it seems to have been written into the system about 4 years ago. That was when Vance Holdings first faced that hostile overseas short-selling attack. I remember. Harrison cut him off. That was handled by Kenji Tanaka's team. Director Tanaka says it wasn't him. He said he had no idea what happened back then. He went to sleep, and when he woke up, the short positions had been completely hedged. He thought it was a natural market rebound. Harrison was silent for a few seconds. Forget it for now. It's just a dormant program. It won't affect daily operations. The assistant nodded and left. 3 days later, on a Thursday morning, Vance Holdings' stock price plummeted 7% at the opening bell. When Harrison walked into the trading monitoring room at 8:45 a.m., the chief trader's shirt was already soaked with sweat. "What's happening?" The trader turned a screen towards him, red numbers flashing. "Someone's shorting us. It's a massive, coordinated attack. They've opened short positions in Singapore, the Cayman Islands, and London simultaneously. Initial estimates are at least a $5 billion position. Who is it? We're still trying to trace it, but the methods are extremely professional, using a web of shell corporations. Mr. Vance, this isn't a random attack. They are precisely targeting our risk exposures in 3 specific overseas projects. It's as if they knew our defensive lines in advance." Harrison's gaze fixed on the screen. 3 projects, 3 vectors. What about the hedging programs? The trader turned to face him, his face pale. "Mr. Vance, our hedging programs went dormant a week ago. All 6 of them. We're completely exposed." The room was silent for 3 seconds. Harrison stood motionless, his hands slowly clenching into fists. "Why wasn't I told about this sooner? Risk management said they reported it to your assistant. I never received it." His voice turned cold. "Activate the backup protocols immediately." "There are no backup protocols," the trader said, his voice dry. "These 6 programs were the final line of defense. They weren't written by the risk department. They were embedded directly into the base code. No one on our team knows their operational logic." "Then write new ones." "Mr. Vance, the attack has already started. Writing new programs of that complexity would take at least 2 weeks. We don't have 2 weeks." Harrison turned and walked back to his office, the door closing behind him. He picked up his phone and dialed Clara's number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He hung up and dialed again. Still out of service. He put the phone down and sat in his chair. Outside the window, the city gleamed under the October sun, no different from 10 days ago. But something was wrong. He couldn't pinpoint what it was, just a feeling that the very foundations were crumbling beneath him. Thursday afternoon, the stock continued to fall, closing down 12%. On Friday, it fell another 9%. In 2 days, nearly $1.5 billion in market value had evaporated. Harrison made over 100 calls in 48 hours, hiring emergency risk management teams from 3 international investment banks and spending $12 million on consulting fees. The conclusion was unanimous. The short-selling strategy was so precise, it was as if an insider was cooperating. If they couldn't re-establish a hedging barrier within 72 hours, Vance Holdings' $3 billion in overseas assets would be completely exposed. On Saturday at 2 a.m., Harrison sat in his office. 3 emergency reports from different investment banks spread before him. Each report pointed to the same conclusion. They needed the original keyholder. There was no alternative. He dialed Clara's number for the 1,000th time, out of service. Then he did something he had never done before. He opened Clara's personal email. He knew the password. He'd set it up for her when they got married. The inbox was empty. Every single email had been deleted. Even the trash was empty. He then logged into the company's internal system and searched for Clara's name. 0 records. She had never left any trace in the corporate system. No employee file, no login history, no email correspondence. It was as if she had never existed at Vance Holdings. But who wrote those 6 hedging programs? On Monday, at the Asia-Pacific Financial Summit gala dinner at the Peninsula Hotel, Harrison arrived. The guest list was a who's who of the financial world. He needed to find someone, anyone, who could help him build a temporary hedging barrier within 72 hours. As he entered, many eyes turned to him, their gazes more complex than usual. The news of Vance Holdings' stock crash had spread like wildfire. Harrison picked up a glass and walked towards his first target. Marcus Thorne, the founder of Singapore's art capital, a white-haired man in his 60s, and the head of the largest long-short hedge fund in the Asia-Pacific region. Marcus Thorne turned, a slight smile on his face. "Harrison, have a seat." They sat in a quiet corner. Harrison cut to the chase. "Marcus, Vance is facing some issues with our overseas positions. I need a temporary hedging solution." "I know," Thorne said, swirling his whiskey. "The whole market knows. Your 6 hedging programs went offline. Your opponent knows it and is hitting you right where it hurts." Harrison's hand tightened slightly. "You know about those programs?" Thorne gave him a look. It wasn't pity. It was something closer to surprise. "Harrison, those 6 programs are legendary in our circles. 4 years ago, When you were first shorted, the attacker was precisely countered and wiped out in 36 hours. Everyone was trying to figure out who was behind it. The technique was magnificent. The use of information asymmetry, the timing of the market windows, the multi-market coordination. It's widely considered the most elegant risk-hedging operation in the Asia-Pacific in the last decade. Harrison said nothing. Thorne put down his glass. You don't know who did it? The company's risk team. Thorne laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. Harrison, I know your risk director, Kenji Tanaka. He's a competent executor, but that level of strategy is beyond him. That was the work of a genius. Harrison's spine went rigid. Do you know who it was? Thorne took a sip of his whiskey without answering directly. 2 years ago, one of your overseas projects was targeted again. I happened to be on the other side of that trade. Nothing personal, just an overlapping asset. I placed a heavy bet, ready to take a piece of you. Overnight, I was countered and lost nearly 800 million. He paused. I spent 3 months investigating who my opponent was. All I found was an offshore account registered in Greece. But the trading commands required a specific biometric key fingerprint plus iris scan. That's where the trail went cold. The word Greece was like a needle piercing Harrison's temple. But then, Thorne continued, last year at an industry conference, a few of the big players were discussing who the best risk strategist in the Asia-Pacific over the last 5 years was. Someone brought up a name. Harrison stared at him. Thorne put down his glass. Clara Hayes, he said, the 2 words landing softly. Harrison's expression didn't change, but the hand holding his glass froze. Your wife, Thorne said, his gaze calm but sharp. She doesn't use her real name in the industry, but the biometric data on the key points to her. A few insiders had figured it out long ago. Every time Vance Holdings has been saved from the brink in the past 4 years, it was her, working from the shadows. Not your risk management team. Her. Alone. Harrison's breath hitched. Thorne leaned back into the sofa, as if watching a rather dull play. So now you come to me for help. You want me to replace your wife? Harrison, I'll be honest with you. It's not that I don't want to help, I can't. The logic of those 6 programs is known only to her. They aren't generic risk models. They were custom-built for Vance Holdings' specific asset structure. Forget me. Even if you brought in Goldman Sachs' entire global risk team, without her keys and her strategic logic, it would be useless. He clapped Harrison on the shoulder. Find your wife. Harrison sat there, the sounds of the gala fading around him. Clara. 4 years, 6 programs. Greece. He remembered the empty email account, the open safe, the missing folder from the nightstand. He remembered her voice on the phone, 10 days ago, saying the baby's gone, flatly, as if it had happened to someone else. Now he understood. That flatness wasn't indifference. It was resolution. He stood up, his legs momentarily stiff. A shame, Marcus Thorne murmured to himself, watching Harrison's retreating back. Such a shame. In the hallway outside the ballroom, Harrison leaned against the wall. His phone screen was lit up. In his contacts, under Clara Hayes, was a string of digits that was now a dead number. He dialed Rachel Quinn's law firm. Rachel Quinn, attorney at law. I need to speak with Clara Hayes. May I ask who is calling? Harrison Vance. Her husband. A 2-second pause. Mr. Vance. Hello. Miss Quinn is not in the office at the moment. If you have a legal matter, this isn't a legal matter. I need to contact Clara. You must have her contact information. Mr. Vance, as per our client agreement, we are not at liberty to provide our client's contact information to any third party. I am her husband. Yes, but Miss Hayes' instructions were explicit. No one, including her spouse, is to be given her information. Harrison gripped the phone, his knuckles white, then put Rachel on the phone. Tell her it's Harrison Vance. It's about Vance Holdings. It's urgent. Another pause, then hold music. A minute later, a calm, professional voice. Mr. Vance, how can I help you? Where is Clara? I'm afraid I can't answer that. She filed for divorce. I don't agree to it. I will convey your position, but the agreement has been executed and is currently undergoing legal notarization. If you refuse to sign, we will proceed through the courts. Let me talk to her. Miss Hayes has stipulated that all communication is to be conducted through me. She will not be contacting you directly. Harrison closed his eyes. Rachel, his voice was low. I know she's angry. I was responsible for what happened with the baby. but we can talk this through. Rachel was silent for a moment. Mr. Vance, I'm not a marriage counselor. My duty is to execute my client's wishes. And Miss Hayes's wishes are clear. A divorce. No assets. Only her freedom. If you have no other legal matters, I'll be ending this call. Wait. Yes? How? How is she? Harrison's voice broke slightly. Rachel didn't answer the question. Goodbye, Mr. Vance. Click. Harrison stood in the hallway, holding the dead phone. The light from the ballroom was golden and warm. The hallway was dark. He put the phone back in his pocket and walked to the elevator. In the car, he didn't start the engine. He just gripped the steering wheel, so tightly his fingers turned white. Clara. For 4 years, she had stood behind him, shielding him from every danger he couldn't see. And he knew nothing. And now, she was gone. He finally started the car. Driving through the city center, he passed the giant billboard. 10 days ago, it had displayed his celebration for Sloane. Now, it was showing a different ad. He glanced at it and quickly looked away. For the first time, the screen felt blindingly harsh. The next week, the stock continued to drop. By Wednesday, they received margin calls. On Thursday, their overseas partners simultaneously issued ultimatums, demanding additional collateral. Within a week, the market value of Vance Holdings had plummeted from $5 billion to $2.6 billion, $2.4 billion, gone. Harrison sat through 16 hours of emergency board meetings. Every proposal was rejected because every proposal depended on reactivating those 6 hedging programs. And the key holder was missing. In Greece, with the only key, when the board meeting finally ended, it was 2 a.m. Everyone had left. Harrison sat alone at the head of the conference table, surrounded by scattered reports. One of them was a technical analysis report from the IT department about the master keys. Biometric verification info. Clara Hayes. Verification method. Fingerprint and iris. First write time. 4 years ago, March 17th. 4 years ago, March 17th. What was that day? He thought for a long time. It was the day after Vance Holdings' first hostile short-selling attack. He had come home that day in a foul mood and slumped on the sofa without a word. Clara had been in the kitchen. She brought him a bowl of soup and set it on the coffee table. Drink this first, she had said. He hadn't. He was on his phone, messaging Sloane. Clara stood there for a moment, then took the soup back to the kitchen. He heard the sound of it being poured down the drain. He worked until 3 a.m. that night. The next morning, the short sellers had been completely wiped out. He always thought it was Kenji Tanaka's team. It turned out she hadn't slept that night either. She had been writing code. He had never once asked her, "What were you doing last night? Why were you up so late?" Never. Harrison closed the report. Then he did another useless thing. He dialed the dead number again. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He slammed the phone on the table. The screen cracked. 3 weeks later, Harrison returned to the Riverside Estates house at 1 a.m. The lock recognized his fingerprint, and the entryway light turned on. He stood at the door, not moving. The house was dark. No one had left a light on for him. He remembered how, no matter how late he came back, a small night light in the hallway was always on, a faint warm yellow glow visible from the entrance. Now, it was gone. He changed his shoes and walked into the living room. The photo frame on the coffee table was still face down. He hadn't touched it in 3 weeks. He went upstairs. The bedroom was neat, the bed made by the housekeeper that morning. The distance between his side of the bed and Clara's seemed vast. He walked into the closet. The 3 racks on the left were empty. Not the kind of empty from 3 weeks ago, where the clothes were there but the person was not. This was a clean, absolute emptiness. 3 days ago, he had told the housekeeper to pack up Clara's clothes and ship them. Ship them where? She'd asked. He didn't know where she was. Just leave them for now, he had said. Now, the clothes were gone. He called the housekeeper. Maria, where are Mrs. Vance's clothes? Mr. Vance? What clothes? The ones on the left side of the closet. They were there before. Oh, people from her lawyer's office came to get them today. They said Mrs. Vance had authorized them to handle her things. They had paperwork, so I let them in. Harrison's hand tightened on the phone. When did they come? Around 2 p.m. You were in a meeting. 2 of them came with boxes. They packed everything up in half an hour. He hung up. He stood in the empty closet. Nothing remained on the 3 racks on the left. Even the faint, lingering scent of her perfume was gone. On the right were his clothes. neatly arranged. It was as if this closet had only ever been used by one person. He reached out and touched an empty metal hanger. It was cold. Then he went to the vanity. The drawers were empty. The jewelry box was empty. On the bathroom counter, her skincare products were gone. In the shower, her shampoo, her loofah, her wooden comb, all gone. He went from room to room. In the study, her laptop was gone. In the living room shoe cabinet, her shoes were gone. In the kitchen, the white mug she always used was gone. The entire house had been surgically cleansed. Every trace of Clara had been precisely, meticulously removed. Not even a single strand of hair was left behind. Harrison ended up standing before the living room's floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the exclusive neighborhood was quiet. He looked at his reflection in the glass. 3 weeks. He hadn't flown to Athens. He couldn't. The company's crisis had him trapped. Endless emergency meetings, debt restructuring negotiations, pressure from investors. He couldn't get away. And Rachel Quinn's firm was an iron wall. He thought it was temporary. He thought when her anger subsided, when this was all over, she would what? He suddenly realized he didn't know the answer. His phone rang. It was his assistant. 1:15 a.m. Mr. Vance, I'm so sorry to bother you this late. We've received a formal notice from Rachel Quinn's law firm. They are requesting a formal signing of the divorce agreement tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the office. They said if you do not cooperate, their next step will be to file a lawsuit directly with the court. Harrison's jaw tightened. Will she be there in person? The notice says Miss Quinn will be there herself. Mrs. Vance will not be present. Fine, 10 a.m., he said, and hung up. The next morning at 9:45 a.m., Harrison sat in his office on the 32nd floor of the Vance Holdings headquarters. The coffee in front of him was cold. At 9:50, his assistant knocked. Mr. Vance, Miss Quinn has arrived. Let her in. The door opened. It wasn't one person, it was 3. Rachel Quinn led the way, a woman in her 40s with short hair, dressed in a black power suit. Behind her were a younger female lawyer and a man carrying notarization documents. Rachel didn't waste time on pleasantries. She sat down across from Harrison, opened her briefcase, and took out a document. Mr. Vance, this is the final version of the divorce agreement, delivered on behalf of my client, Miss Clara Hayes. I believe you have already seen the contents. He had. His assistant had sent him a scan 3 weeks ago. He had torn it to shreds. I'm not signing. Rachel looked up, her expression calm, as if she had expected this. She took another document from her briefcase. In that case, this is Plan B, a copy of the court petition. If you do not sign today, we will formally file this within 72 hours. Given the defendant's continuous marital infidelity, for which we have ample evidence, the outcome of the judgment is not in doubt. What evidence? Rachel looked at him and smiled faintly. Mr. Vance, do you really want to discuss the evidence here? Harrison's jaw tightened. I want to see Clara. Miss Hayes does not wish to see you. This is between her and me. You're just a lawyer. Rachel put her pen down, her hands clasped on the table. Mr. Vance, I am indeed just a lawyer. Therefore, I will only speak on matters within the scope of the law. She paused. Miss Hayes has waived her right to all community property. Under current law, this means she gets nothing. 4 years of marriage, and she walks away with nothing. All you are required to do is sign your name. I don't want her to walk away with nothing. I don't want a divorce. You don't want a divorce, Rachel repeated, her tone flat, as if stating an unimportant fact. But Mr. Vance, Miss Hayes does. Harrison was silent. Rachel waited 5 seconds, then continued. I took on this case the day after Miss Hayes had her surgery. She discharged herself from the hospital against medical advice, took a cab to my office wearing a hospital gown and slippers borrowed from a nurse, with blood still seeping from the gauze on her abdomen. Harrison's eyelid twitched. Enough. The first thing she said when she sat down was, I want a divorce. I don't want any property. I just want my freedom. Rachel looked directly at Harrison. Mr. Vance, in my 12 years of practice, I have seen people cry, fight over assets, fight over children during a divorce. But I have never seen someone, still bleeding from a major surgery, say the words, I just want my freedom, with such calm. Harrison's fingers trembled on the armrest. So, I have to wonder, what must a woman be put through to feel that her personal freedom is the only thing she has left to want? Rachel, Harrison's voice was low. I know you have an opinion of me, but what happened between Clara and me is not for an outsider to judge. I admit I was wrong that night. That night? Rachel interrupted. Are you certain it was only that one night? Harrison froze. From the bottom of her briefcase, Rachel pulled out a folder. It wasn't thick, maybe a dozen pages. This is material Miss Hayes authorized me to present to you if necessary. After you've read it, if you still refuse to sign, we will see you in court. She pushed the folder across the table. Harrison stared at it. It was a plain, beige file folder. He reached out and opened it. The first page was a flight itinerary screenshot. Date, 3 weeks ago. Destination, Athens. The second page was a copy of a Greek permanent residency card. Issue date, 3 years ago. He had no idea. The third page was a bank account statement. HSBC offshore account. Account name, Clara Hayes. He glanced at the balance. His fingers went numb. A 9-figure sum. He never knew she had that kind of money. The fourth page was a technical report from the Vance Holdings internal system, titled Core Hedging Program Master Keyholder Trace. A line was circled in red ink. Keyholder. Clara Hayes. First write time. 4 years ago, March 17th. He already knew this part from Marcus Thorne, but seeing it in black and white still felt like having the air punched out of him. Pages 5 through 10 were operational records of every short-selling attack Vance Holdings had faced in the last 4 years. 6 incidents. The command issuer for every counter-operation was the same offshore account, Clara's. The last page contained a single line in her handwriting. This is a list of everything I did for Vance Holdings for 4 years. Now, I'm done. Harrison closed the folder. His hand rested on it, unmoving. Mr. Vance. Rachel's voice came from across the table. Do you have anything else to say? He looked up. Rachel's gaze wasn't one of pity or anger. It was something colder. Contempt. I have a personal question for you, if you don't mind, she said. Purely out of curiosity, not as part of my professional duties. Harrison didn't speak. That night your wife, 7 months pregnant, fell in the bathroom and started hemorrhaging. She called you 5 times. You didn't answer a single one. She walked barefoot to the main road to hail a cab, but every car had been chartered by you. She was finally taken to the hospital by a kind driver who risked his bonus to help her. Rachel paused. And where were you at that time? Harrison's throat worked, but no sound came out. You were at the city plaza, one hand holding another woman's son, the other hand on that woman's waist, smiling at a sky full of pink LED screens. I didn't know. You didn't know, Rachel nodded. Right. You didn't know anything. You didn't know she had a miscarriage. You didn't know she signed her own surgical consent form. You didn't know she lay alone in that recovery room all night. She stood up. And you didn't know that for the past 4 years, every time your company was on the verge of collapse, it was her, at 3 a.m. in front of a computer screen, who was plugging every single one of your leaks. Rachel closed her briefcase. She stood by the table, looking down at Harrison, who was still seated. Mr. Vance, I have one last thing to say. Miss Hayes asked me to tell you 2 words. Do whatever. Sign it or don't. She doesn't care anymore. For her, this agreement is just a formality. Her person is already in Athens. Her money, her identity, her life, none of it requires your name anymore. She walked to the door. But if you insist on dragging this out, she said, her hand on the doorknob, when we meet in court, all of this material will be made public, including every dollar, every property your Miss Sloan has received from you over the past 4 years, every expense disguised as a PR event. I'm very curious to see what that total comes to. She turned to leave, then paused as if remembering something. Oh, and by the way, the people in your company saw me arrive. The door opened. In the hallway outside, at least 7 or 8 people were standing around. Some pretended to be passing by, others stood frozen with coffee mugs, and some were directly by the assistant's desk, staring. They saw Rachel Quinn emerge from the CEO's office. They saw the briefcase in her hand. And in the few seconds the door was open, they saw Harrison Vance, sitting alone in his chair, a file folder open before him, his face ashen. Rachel walked past them, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply on the tile floor. As she reached the elevator, a voice called out from behind her. It was the head of the legal department, a woman in her 50s who had been with the company for 8 years. Miss Quinn. Rachel turned. The woman walked over, holding a brown envelope. This is my resignation letter, she said. Could you please pass it on to Mrs. Vance for me? Tell her. She paused, pushing up her glasses. Tell her we all knew who was really holding this company together all these years. Rachel took the envelope. The elevator arrived. As she stepped in, She saw two more people approaching with envelopes in their hands. The doors closed. At the same time, in Harrison's office, he was still in his chair. The folder was open to the last page, to Clara's handwriting. He stared at it for a long time. He picked up his phone. Clara's name was gone from his contacts, but he remembered the number. He dialed it. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He knew it would be, but he dialed it anyway. A daily ritual to confirm that she was truly gone. The door knocked softly. His assistant peeked in. Mr. Vance, the head of legal, the director of risk, and the senior analyst from trading have all submitted their resignations. Understood. Should I try to persuade them to stay? No. The assistant retreated. Harrison stood up and walked to the window. From the 32nd floor, the city spread out below him. 3 weeks ago, he had taken it all for granted. This building, this office, everything outside that belonged to him. What belonged to him? The company's market value had fallen from $5 billion to $1.8 billion and was still dropping. The overseas short sellers were like sharks that had smelled blood. Without Clara's hedging programs, his risk team was a squad of deaf goalkeepers. Investors were pulling out, partners were demanding more collateral, and banks were considering retracting his lines of credit. And his wife, his ex-wife, was in Athens. By the sea, in the sun, with the only key in the world, and she wasn't coming back. He turned from the window, went back to his desk, and picked up the divorce agreement Rachel had left. 8 pages. Both parties voluntarily agree. The female party waives all rights. The female party obtains full and complete personal freedom. He stared at that third clause. Personal freedom. He picked up his pen. The nib hovered over the signature line for a long time. He didn't sign. He put the pen down, closed the agreement, and put it in a drawer. Then he picked up his phone and dialed another number. Book me a flight to Athens for tomorrow. The next day, in the airport's first-class lounge, Harrison sat with his boarding pass, flight CA 973 to Athens. His phone rang. It was Rachel Quinn. Mr. Vance, I heard you booked a flight to Athens. How did you know? That's not important. Her voice was flat. I'm simply reminding you that Miss Hayes's current address is protected under Greek privacy laws. Even if you get to Athens, you will not find her. Furthermore, if you attempt to obtain her address through any illegal means, we will immediately file for a restraining order with the Greek courts. At that point, not only will you not find her, but you may also be barred from entering the country. Harrison clenched his jaw. Does she hate me that much? A pause. Mr. Vance, this isn't hate. Hate requires caring. The line went dead. Harrison sat in the lounge holding his phone. The boarding announcement for his flight to Athens began. He didn't know what street she lived on, what building, what her new phone number was. He knew nothing, just like for the past 4 years. He hadn't known she was writing code for him at 3 a.m. He hadn't known she had a 9-figure offshore account. He hadn't known she got Greek residency 3 years ago. He hadn't known his child was dying that night. He hadn't known she signed the consent form alone. He hadn't known she was on the street, covered in blood, unable to get a car. He knew nothing. Final boarding call for flight CA 973 to Athens. Harrison stood up. Then he sat back down. He looked at his boarding pass for a few seconds, then tore it into pieces. The fragments fluttered onto the lounge carpet. What would he do even if he went? What would he say if he found her? She didn't want to see him. She wouldn't even leave a single piece of clothing in his house. He stood up and walked towards the exit. His phone rang again. His assistant. Mr. Vance, the bank is on the line. They say if we can't provide additional collateral by Monday, they will initiate a forced liquidation of our assets. How much? $870 million. Harrison stood before the airport's automatic doors. The doors sensed him and slid open. The November wind was cold. I'm on my way back to the office, he said. 1 month later, the company was crumbling. Before the final creditors' meeting that would seal his fate, Harrison drove to Metropolitan General Hospital. He used his status as Clara's legal spouse to demand a meeting with her attending physician, desperate for any clue about why she left so cleanly. Dr. Evans, a woman in her early 30s, sat behind her desk. She looked at the haggard CEO sitting across from her. You want her records, Mr. Vance? Dr. Evans asked, her voice dangerously quiet. You want to know why she disappeared? Just tell me what happened on October 17th, Harrison demanded. Dr. Evans opened a file and slapped a document onto the desk. On the night of October 17th, your wife was brought to the emergency room. Placental abruption, severe hemorrhaging. She lost nearly 1 liter of blood. Harrison's fingers froze. She was 28 weeks pregnant. The fetus did not survive. Dr. Evans's gaze bored into him. The room was utterly silent. Harrison sat motionless, the fingers of his right hand slowly curling into a fist. "I know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You know?" Dr. Evans's voice rose sharply, no longer caring about professional distance. "What do you know? Do you know how she got here? She arrived on foot, barefoot, in a state of pre-shock. The surgical consent form? Signed by the patient. Family member signature line, blank. We called you 5 times. She pulled one last thing from her file, a color photograph. She placed it face up in front of Harrison. Since you requested her file as her husband, here is the fetal autopsy photo." Harrison looked down. His body went rigid. It was a tiny, purple, curled human form. His child, 28 weeks. Formed, fingers, toes, closed eyes, dead. Male infant. 2.6 pounds, Dr. Evans said mercilessly. If she had arrived within 30 minutes, he had a 70% chance. But it took her nearly 2 hours. Because she couldn't get a car. Because you, Mr. Vance, flooded the downtown area with a massive cash bonus for a PR stunt, draining every rideshare from her neighborhood. The words fell like stones. "Your son," she pointed at the photo, "is dead." His heart stopped at approximately 11:15 p.m. "Where were you then?" "You were holding another woman's son in a plaza lit by pink screens." "Stop," Harrison squeezed out, his body shaking violently. "I will not stop." She lay on my table for 2 hours. When she woke up, she didn't cry. She just touched her stomach. "Do you know what it feels like to lose a baby that was already kicking?" "Every morning at 5 a.m., she told me. Harrison's body convulsed. He slumped forward, sliding from his chair until his knees hit the cold hospital floor. He was kneeling, his hands clutching his head, a guttural, primal sound escaping his throat. Dr. Evans stood up. "Take your files, Mr. Vance, and get out of my office. I've seen all kinds of monsters in my career, but you are in a league of your own." That afternoon, Harrison walked into the Vance Holdings creditors meeting a hollow shell of a man. He didn't fight the liquidation. He didn't speak. He simply signed the bankruptcy papers with a bandaged, bleeding hand, his mind forever trapped in a cold hospital room with a photo of a boy who never opened his eyes. That night, Harrison sat on the floor of his dark living room. He was staring at a photo on his phone, a picture of the picture Dr. Evans had left, the image of his son. He sat in the dark and tried to think of a name. But every time he thought of one, he heard Dr. Evans's voice. Every morning at 5 a.m., he would kick her, and his mind would go blank. A call came from Sloan. He ignored it. A voice message played. "Harrison, don't listen to what they're saying online. It wasn't your fault she fell. You shouldn't feel bad. I'm worried about you. Maybe I should come over." Harrison hurled the phone against the wall. The screen shattered, but the message kept playing, broken and distorted. "Are you listening? Maybe I can have Leo call you? You said you wanted to take him to the amusement park." Leo, Sloane's son, the boy on his shoulders that night. That night he had held another man's son while his own son was dying. Harrison stumbled to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and took out a fruit knife. He didn't cut. He used the back of the blade to smash his own left hand, again and again. The pain was immense, but it was useless. Pain couldn't take him back to October 17th. Pain couldn't make him answer those 5 missed calls. Pain couldn't bring his son back to life. He dropped the knife and sank to the floor, holding his head, a guttural, primal sound escaping his throat. 3 months later, Santorini, Greece. Clara's phone rang. It was Rachel. "Clara, just to let you know." Harrison signed. Clara was on her balcony, watering a pot of mint. "Okay. The divorce is final. You're legally single." "Good." "Also," Rachel paused. "His health isn't good. He was hospitalized last week. I heard it's stomach cancer. The water from the watering can didn't stop." "What does that have to do with me?" A 2-second silence. "Nothing. Just informing you." "Thank you, Rachel." Clara hung up. She had rented a small 3-story villa facing the Aegean Sea. Her days were simple. She woke up, fed the orange cat she had adopted, watered her plants, read on the balcony. Sometimes she walked on the beach. She made a few friends. No one knew her past. Here, she was just a quiet woman from abroad who lived alone with her cat. She felt nothing about the news. Not anger, Not pity, nothing. It was like a cup of water that had long gone cold. No matter how much you shook it, it would never be warm again. One afternoon in May, Clara was walking back from the beach when she stopped. A man was standing at the end of her alleyway. He was skeletal, his cheekbones sharp, his eyes sunken. He wore a black trench coat that was absurdly out of place in the bright Santorini sun. It was Harrison. She stood 10 meters away, looked at him for 3 seconds, then continued walking toward her door. As she passed him, he spoke. "Clara." She didn't stop. "Clara," he said again, his voice a raw rasp. "Please, stop." She stopped at her door to get her keys. Her back was to him. "How did you find me?" "It took a long time." His voice came from behind her. "Rachel wouldn't tell me. I searched for 3 months." Clara unlocked her door and stepped inside. "Wait." She didn't close the door, but she didn't turn around either. "Say what you have to say." She heard his footsteps, slow and heavy. He stopped at the doorway but didn't enter. "I have stomach cancer," he said. "Terminal." Her cat trotted over and rubbed against her leg. "I know. The doctors said 6 months, at most." "Okay." A long silence. "I wanted to see you one last time." "You've seen me." "Clara," he said, his voice broken. "I know I have no right. I know everything now. About the baby, the cars, that night. I know it all." She finally turned to face him. He was even thinner than before. He held out a paper envelope, his hand shaking. "This is the diagnosis. I'm not lying." Clara looked at the envelope, but didn't take it. "No need." "Clara, Harrison called her name. Clara looked at him, her voice calm, devoid of any warmth, like she was addressing a stranger. "What do you want?" I wanted to say I'm sorry," he faltered. "You've said it." His hand dropped. The envelope fell. He stood in the doorway, the sun behind him, casting a long, thin shadow. "I know nothing I say can fix it," he whispered. "But I want you to know, I regret it. Every day, every second, since I found out about our child." "Which child?" Clara asked, her arms crossed. "The boy on your shoulders that night? Or the one who died inside my body?" Harrison staggered back as if struck, hitting the white wall of the alley. "Did you know?" Clara said. "He used to kick me every morning at 5 a.m. It was like clockwork. I told you about it once. You were looking at your phone. You just said, Harrison's knees buckled. He tried to stay up, but couldn't. He fell to his knees on the stone path. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Forgive me, or yell at me, hit me, anything. Just don't look at me like I'm already dead." Clara looked down at him. The once mighty CEO, kneeling on a stone path in Greece, clutching a terminal cancer diagnosis. She felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, nothing. It was like looking at a retribution, she said softly. No anger, no scorn, just a statement of fact. The sky is blue, the sea is salt. You have cancer. It's retribution. His hand fell, and tears streamed silently down his skeletal face. Clara looked at him one last time, then stepped inside and closed the door. The latch clicked softly. She sat on the sofa. Her cat jumped onto her lap. Outside, the sea was a brilliant blue. After a long time, she heard footsteps, slow and shuffling, fading into the distance. He was gone. She picked up her book and continued reading. 6 weeks later, Rachel called. "Clara. Harrison passed away 3 days ago." Clara was hanging laundry on the balcony. A white cotton shirt billowed in the sea breeze. "How?" "Complications from the cancer. He was alone, I heard." "I see. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. The weather is beautiful today." Clara hung up. She sat in her lounge chair, her cat curled on her lap. The sun was warm. He was dead. It was like a door she had closed long ago, had finally been locked from the outside. A white sailboat was gliding across the sparkling sea. She took a sip of her iced lemonade. It was cool and sweet. She was alive. In the sun. By the sea. And that was enough.